The letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, stamped with the official seal of the Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association, and it immediately set my teeth on edge. I'm Richard Norton, and I had lived peacefully in my two-story colonial home in Phoenix, Arizona, for exactly 3 years before the new HOA board took over. My house was my pride and joy, a beautiful cream-colored structure with dark green shutters that I had meticulously maintained since the day I moved in. The property sat on a corner lot in a development that had been built in the early 2000s, and everything about it was perfect. Or at least I thought it was. I stood in my driveway, still holding my briefcase from work as I tore open the envelope. The Arizona sun beat down on my shoulders, and I could feel sweat beginning to form on my forehead. Inside was a formal notice of violation, complete with photographs of my house taken from various angles. My eyes scanned the document quickly, landing on the violation description. Chimney height exceeds HOA regulations by 14 inches. Section 7.3.2 of the Riverside Meadows CC and Articus states that no chimney shall exceed the roofline by more than 36 inches. Your chimney currently measures 50 inches above the roofline. Fine, $500. Please remedy within 30 days or additional fines of $100 per week will be assessed. I stared at the letter in disbelief. My chimney had been exactly this height since the day the house was built. In fact, every house on my street had chimneys of varying heights, some clearly taller than mine. I had never received any notice about this before, and the timing felt deliberate and malicious. The new HOA president was a woman named Patricia Henderson, a middle-aged real estate agent who had moved into the neighborhood only 18 months ago. She had swept into power during the last election with promises of maintaining property values and enforcing standards. What she really meant, I had quickly learned, was that she enjoyed having power over other people. I walked into my house and immediately went to my home office, pulling out the thick binder containing all my closing documents. I flipped through pages of inspection reports, surveys, and certificates of occupancy. There it was, clear as day. The original builder's specifications showed the chimney at exactly 50 inches above the roofline. It had passed all inspections. The house had been approved by the HOA Architectural Committee before construction even began. This was ridiculous. I picked up my phone and dialed the HOA management company. After being transferred 3 times, I finally reached someone who claimed to be able to help me. Riverside Meadows HOA, this is Jennifer speaking. How can I help you? Hi, Jennifer. This is Richard Norton at 2847 Riverside Drive. I just received a violation notice about my chimney height, and I need to contest it. My chimney has been this height since the house was built and was approved during the original construction. There was a pause, and I could hear her typing on a keyboard. Yes, Mr. Norton, I see the violation here in our system. The issue was brought to our attention during the recent property inspection conducted by the new board. The chimney was approved when the house was built, I repeated, trying to keep my voice calm. I have all the original documentation showing that it passed inspection and was within specifications at the time of construction. I understand your concern, Mr. Norton, but the current board has the authority to enforce all CC&R provisions. You are welcome to request a hearing to present your case. However, the fine stands until the violation is remedied or the board rules in your favor. Fine. Schedule me a hearing as soon as possible. The next available hearing date is 3 weeks from today. I'll send you the details via email. I hung up feeling frustrated but determined. This was clearly a targeted harassment campaign, and I was not going to let Patricia Henderson bully me into spending thousands of dollars to modify a chimney that had been legally constructed. Over the next few days, I did my research. I dug into the CC and Articles, the architectural guidelines, and every amendment that had been passed since the neighborhood was established. I discovered something interesting. The regulation Patricia was citing had been added only 6 months ago, slipped into a package of amendments during a meeting where only 12 homeowners out of 300 had attended. The amendment specifically stated that it applied to new construction and modifications, with no mention of requiring existing structures to be brought into compliance. I felt a surge of satisfaction. This was my ticket out. The regulation did not apply retroactively to homes built before the amendment passed. I prepared my case meticulously. I printed out my original building plans, inspection reports, certificates of occupancy, and the dated photographs from my closing documents. I highlighted the relevant sections of the CC and Articles, and prepared a written statement explaining why the fine should be dismissed. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday evening at 7 o'clock in the community center clubhouse. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing a button-down shirt and khakis, carrying a leather portfolio containing all my documentation. The room was set up with a long table at the front where the board members sat, facing rows of chairs for residents. Only a handful of other homeowners were present, most of them there for their own violation hearings. Patricia Henderson sat in the center of the board table, flanked by 4 other board members. She was exactly what you would imagine when you pictured an HOA tyrant. Perfectly coiffed blonde hair with highlights that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, a navy blue blazer with gold buttons, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She looked to be in her early 50s, with that particular brand of entitlement that came from never being told no. "Good evening, everyone," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false pleasantness. "Let's begin with our scheduled hearings. First up, we have Richard Norton regarding violation number 2020-187, Chimney Height." I stood and walked to the front of the room, setting my portfolio on the podium they had provided. "Good evening, board members. Thank you for hearing my case. As you know, I received a violation notice stating that my chimney exceeds the height regulation by 14 inches. However, I am here to contest this violation on several grounds. I opened my portfolio and began distributing copies of my documents to each board member. First, my chimney has been at its current height since the house was originally constructed in 2018. Here are the original builder specifications, showing the chimney at 50 inches above the roofline. Here is the certificate of occupancy, showing that the house passed all required inspections. And here is the approval from this HOA's architectural committee, dated May 2018, approving the construction plans. Patricia barely glanced at the documents. "Mr. Norton, I appreciate that you have done your homework, but the fact remains that your chimney currently violates our regulations. The height restriction is clearly stated in Section 7.3.2. Section 7.3.2 was added to the CC and Articles only 6 months ago," I countered. "Furthermore, the amendment language specifically states that it applies to new construction and modifications. My chimney is neither. It is an existing structure that was legally built in compliance with all regulations in effect at that time." One of the other board members, a man named David who I recognized from neighborhood events, leaned forward. "That's actually a good point, Patricia. The amendment language is pretty specific about applying to new construction." Patricia's jaw tightened. "The board has a responsibility to maintain uniform standards throughout the community. If we allow one homeowner to violate the regulations, we create a precedent. I am not violating anything, I said firmly. I am grandfathered in under the previous regulations. You cannot retroactively apply new rules to existing structures without proper notice and procedure. That's basic property law. Another board member, a woman named Susan, nodded slowly. He has a point, Patricia. We might be on shaky legal ground here. Patricia's face flushed slightly. We will take this matter under advisement and issue a ruling within 10 business days. Thank you, Mr. Norton. I gathered my documents and returned to my seat, feeling cautiously optimistic. I had made a strong case, and at least 2 board members seemed to see reason. 10 days later, I received the board's decision via certified mail. I opened it with anticipation, fully expecting them to dismiss the violation. I was wrong. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, the board has determined that the violation stands. While Mr. Norton's chimney was constructed in accordance with the regulations in effect at that time, the current CC and Articles require all structures to be brought into compliance within a reasonable time frame. The fine of $500 is upheld, and Mr. Norton has 30 days from the date of this letter to remedy the violation or face additional penalties. I could not believe what I was reading. They had completely ignored the legal argument about retroactive enforcement. This was not just wrong, it was potentially illegal. I immediately contacted a real estate attorney named Michael Chen who specialized in HOA disputes. His office was in Scottsdale, about a 20-minute drive from my home. I met with him the following Tuesday, bringing all my documentation. Michael was in his mid-30s, dressed in a sharp gray suit, and had the confident air of someone who knew his business. He reviewed my documents carefully, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. "This is pretty clear-cut," he said finally. "They cannot retroactively enforce a regulation that was specifically written to apply only to new construction and modifications. You have not modified your chimney. It has remained exactly as it was built." "So what are my options?" I asked. "You can sue the HOA for improper enforcement of the CC and Articles. Given the documentation you have, I think you have a strong case. However, litigation is expensive and time-consuming. An alternative would be to send a formal legal demand letter, threatening litigation if they don't rescind the violation. Sometimes that's enough to make them back down. Let's start with the demand letter," I said. "I don't want to spend tens of thousands on legal fees if I can avoid it." Michael drafted a comprehensive demand letter, citing specific case law about retroactive enforcement of HOA regulations and the improper application of CC and R amendments. He sent it via certified mail to both the HOA management company and Patricia Henderson, personally. 2 weeks went by with no response. Then, I received another letter from the HOA. They had added the first round of additional fines, bringing my total to $600, and were now threatening to place a lien on my property if I did not pay. I was furious. I called Michael immediately. "They're not backing down," I told him. "They just increased the fine." "Then I think it's time to file suit," Michael said. "But I have to warn you, Richard, this could take months or even years to resolve. And even if you win, collecting attorney's fees from an HOA can be difficult." I sat in my office that evening, staring at the violation notices spread across my desk. The fine was now $600, with more being added every week. In a few months, it would be thousands of dollars. The stress was affecting my work, my sleep, and my overall quality of life. Patricia Henderson was winning, and she knew it. That's when I had an idea. It was petty, perhaps even childish, but it was also perfectly legal. If they wanted to play games with regulations and technicalities, I could play that game too. I pulled up the CC and Articus on my computer and read section 7.3.2 again, this time paying attention to every single word. No chimney shall exceed the roofline by more than 36 inches. The regulation specified the height of the chimney itself, but it said nothing about chimney caps. A chimney cap was a separate accessory, a metal covering that sat on top of the chimney to prevent rain, debris, and animals from entering. They came in various heights and styles, and technically, a chimney cap was not part of the chimney itself. I started researching chimney caps, looking for the tallest, most elaborate design I could find. After hours of searching, I found exactly what I needed: a decorative copper chimney cap with an extended draft hood that added an additional 18 inches of height. It was beautiful, functional, and would make my chimney taller than it currently was, not shorter. The next morning, I called a local chimney company called Desert Chimney Services. I spoke with the owner, a guy named Tony who had been in business for 20 years. "I need a custom chimney cap installed," I told him. "Something tall and decorative." "Sure, I can help with that. What did you have in mind?" I described the copper cap I had found online. "Can you get something like that?" "Absolutely. Those copper caps are nice. They'll last forever in this climate." "When do you want it installed?" "As soon as possible." Tony came out 3 days later with the cap. It was even more impressive in person, with an ornate copper crown and a tall draft hood that would add 19 inches to my chimney's overall height. The copper had a beautiful patina that caught the sunlight. "This is a beauty," Tony said as he examined my chimney. "You sure you want to go this tall? It's going to make your chimney really stand out." "That's exactly what I want," I said with a smile. Tony installed the cap in about 2 hours. When he was finished, my chimney stood 69 inches above the roofline, a full 33 inches over the HOA's regulation. But the chimney itself had not changed height at all. Only the cap had been added. I paid Tony and then stood in my front yard, admiring his work. The copper cap gleamed in the afternoon sun, visible from down the street. It was magnificent. I knew it would not take long for Patricia to notice. I was right. 4 days later, I received an angry phone call from the HOA management company. "Mr. Norton, this is Jennifer from the Riverside Meadows HOA. We have received multiple complaints about your chimney. It appears to have gotten taller." "I installed a chimney cap," I said cheerfully. "It's a beauty, isn't it?" "Mr. Norton, your chimney now exceeds the height regulation by over 30 inches. This is a serious violation." "Actually, my chimney has not changed height at all. It is still exactly 50 inches above the roofline, just as it was when it was built." "What you are seeing is a chimney cap, which is an accessory, not part of the chimney structure itself." There was a long pause. "Mr. Norton, you know exactly what you are doing." "I am following the CC and Articus to the letter," I said. "Section 7.3.2 regulates chimney height, not chimney cap height. If the board wanted to regulate chimney caps, they should have included specific language about that. The board will be issuing a new violation notice immediately." "I look forward to contesting it," I said and hung up. That evening, I received an email from Patricia Henderson herself, demanding that I remove the chimney cap immediately. I responded with a detailed email citing the exact language of the CC and Articus, and explaining that chimney caps were not regulated under any current provision. I copied Michael Chen on the email. Patricia fired back within an hour, claiming that the chimney cap was a modification to the chimney and therefore subject to architectural committee approval. Michael responded on my behalf, pointing out that chimney caps were explicitly listed in the architectural guidelines as a minor accessory that did not require committee approval, similar to mailboxes and house numbers. I could practically feel Patricia's rage through the email chain. True to form, I received a new violation notice the following week. This one claimed that my chimney cap was aesthetically inconsistent with the neighborhood character and demanded its removal with a $750 fine. I immediately requested another hearing. This time, when I arrived at the community center, the room was packed. Word had spread through the neighborhood about my chimney cap defiance, and dozens of homeowners had shown up to watch the proceedings. Many of them had their own grievances with Patricia's heavy-handed enforcement tactics and saw my case as a proxy battle. I noticed several people giving me thumbs up and words of encouragement as I walked to the front of the room. Patricia looked furious at the turnout. "Let's begin," she said tersely. "Mr. Norton, you are here regarding violation 2024-223, unauthorized chimney modification resulting in aesthetic incompatibility." "Thank you, Madam President," I said, placing my new portfolio on the podium. "I am here to contest this violation on multiple grounds. First, I did not modify my chimney. I installed a chimney cap, which is explicitly listed in Section 9.4 of the Architectural Guidelines as a minor accessory that does not require committee approval. I distributed copies of the relevant guideline to each board member, with the section highlighted. Second, the violation notice claims aesthetic incompatibility, but provides no objective standard for what that means. The chimney cap is made of copper, a traditional and high-quality material that is widely used throughout this neighborhood. In fact, if you look at the photos I have included, you will see that at least 15 other homes in Riverside Meadows have copper chimney caps. I had spent the previous weekend driving through the neighborhood with my camera, documenting every copper chimney cap I could find. The photos were now arranged in a neat grid, showing that my cap was far from unique. Third, and most importantly, this violation is retaliatory. The board issued the original violation for chimney height, which I successfully contested on legal grounds. When I installed a chimney cap, which is my right under the CC and Articles, the board immediately issued a new violation. This is a clear pattern of harassment. David, the board member who had supported me during the first hearing, raised his hand. "Patricia, I think we need to be careful here. Mr. Norton has a point about the architectural guidelines. Chimney caps are specifically listed as not requiring approval. The guidelines give the board discretion to determine what is aesthetically appropriate," Patricia snapped. "But there has to be some objective standard," Susan added. "We cannot just fine people because we personally do not like their design choices. Half the neighborhood has copper chimney features. The chimney cap is excessively tall," Patricia insisted. "It creates a visual disruption. The CC and Articles do not regulate chimney cap height," I pointed out. "Only chimney height. If you wanted to regulate cap height, you should have included that in the amendments you passed." An elderly man in the audience suddenly stood up. "I would like to say something." Patricia looked annoyed. "Mr. Carlson, this is not an open forum." "I am a homeowner, and I have a right to speak," Mr. Carlson said firmly. He was in his 70s, with white hair and an authoritative presence. "I have lived in this neighborhood since these homes were first built. I served on the original architectural committee." "Patricia, what you are doing here is not about maintaining standards. It is about exercising control. This young man's chimney cap is perfectly appropriate, and you know it." Several people in the audience applauded. Patricia's face turned red. "Order," she snapped, banging a gavel on the table. "Mr. Carlson, sit down or you will be asked to leave." "This is a homeowners meeting," Mr. Carlson said. "You cannot silence homeowners." Michael Chen, who had accompanied me to this hearing, stood up. Madam President, if I may interject, I am Mr. Norton's attorney. I want to put the board on notice that if this violation is not dismissed, we will be filing suit not only for improper enforcement of the CC and Articles, but also for harassment and selective enforcement. We have documented multiple instances of other homeowners with similar or taller chimney accessories that have not been cited. We are prepared to seek damages and attorney's fees. The room fell silent. Patricia stared at Michael, clearly weighing her options. Another board member, a man named Tom who had not spoken during the previous hearing, cleared his throat. I move that we table this violation pending a full review of our chimney and accessory regulations. Second, David said immediately. We do not need a full review, Patricia protested. This is a simple matter of enforcing our existing rules. All in favor of tabling the violation, Tom said, raising his hand. David, Susan, and one other board member raised their hands as well. 4 out of 5 votes. Patricia slammed her gavel down. Fine. The violation is tabled. This meeting is adjourned. I left the community center feeling triumphant, surrounded by congratulatory homeowners. Several people shook my hand and thanked me for standing up to Patricia. One woman told me she had been fined $1,200 for having the wrong shade of brown on her fence, despite the fact that the paint was from the approved color palette. Another man said he had been cited for parking his truck in his own driveway because it was considered a commercial vehicle, even though it was just his personal pickup. The stories went on and on. Patricia had created an atmosphere of fear and control, and people were fed up. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. Homeowners started organizing. Mr. Carlson, the elderly man who had spoken up during my hearing, reached out to me and several others to form a coalition. We called it the Riverside Meadows Homeowners Coalition, and our goal was to recall Patricia Henderson and the board members who supported her heavy-handed tactics. We held our first meeting at Mr. Carlson's house. About 30 homeowners showed up, filling his living room and spilling out onto the patio. Everyone had stories of ridiculous violations, arbitrary enforcement, and Patricia's general tyranny. We need to recall the entire board, Mr. Carlson said. According to the CC and Articles, we can initiate a recall election if we get signatures from 20% of the homeowners. That is 60 signatures. I can get 60 signatures in my cul-de-sac alone, one woman said, to general laughter. We organized a petition drive. Within 2 weeks, we had collected over 100 signatures, nearly double what we needed. The management company was forced to schedule a recall election for 6 weeks later. Patricia fought back hard. She sent out mass emails claiming that the recall effort was being led by a small group of malcontents who want to turn our beautiful neighborhood into a lawless free-for-all. She held a counter meeting at the community center, though only about 15 people showed up, mostly her friends. She also continued to target me. I received 2 more violation notices during this period. One for a small oil stain on my driveway from where my car had leaked, and another claiming that my front yard grass was a 1/4 inch too long. Both violations were absurd and clearly retaliatory, but I dutifully contested them and had them dismissed. The recall election was held on a Saturday afternoon in November. The turnout was unprecedented. Over 200 homeowners showed up to vote, more than 5 times the usual attendance at HOA meetings. I volunteered as a poll observer, watching as people filed in throughout the day. The mood was electric. People were excited to finally have a chance to end Patricia's reign. I saw neighbors who had never spoken to each other before chatting and comparing notes on their violation histories. When the votes were counted that evening, the results were overwhelming. Patricia Henderson and two of her allied board members were recalled by margins of over 70%. David and Susan, who had shown some independence and fairness, were retained. 3 new board members were elected from a slate of candidates our coalition had recruited. Patricia's face when the results were announced was a mixture of shock and rage. She gathered her belongings and stormed out of the community center without saying a word. I never saw her at a neighborhood event again. The new board held its first meeting 2 weeks later. David was elected president, and Susan became vice president. One of their first acts was to repeal the restrictive chimney height amendment and several other regulations that had been passed during Patricia's tenure. They also conducted a comprehensive review of all outstanding violations and fines. My original chimney fine was dismissed entirely, along with dozens of other questionable violations that had been issued over the past year. The board issued formal apologies to several homeowners who had been subjected to particularly egregious harassment. I was invited to serve on the new architectural committee, which I accepted. We rewrote the guidelines to be clear, objective, and fair, eliminating the vague, aesthetic compatibility language that had given Patricia so much arbitrary power. But the story did not end there. About 3 months after the recall election, I was contacted by an investigator from the Arizona Attorney General's office. Her name was Detective Linda Morrison, and she wanted to talk to me about the Riverside Meadows HOA. We met at a coffee shop in Phoenix. Detective Morrison was a sharp woman in her 40s with short dark hair and an all-business demeanor. "Mr. Norton, thank you for meeting with me. I am investigating allegations of financial impropriety involving your HOA during Patricia Henderson's tenure as president." "Financial impropriety?" I asked, surprised. "We have received complaints suggesting that Miss Henderson may have misappropriated HOA funds. I am talking to homeowners who had significant interactions with her during that period. Can you tell me about your experience?" I recounted the entire chimney saga, the arbitrary fines, the retaliation, and the overall pattern of harassment. Detective Morrison took detailed notes. "Did you pay any of the fines she assessed?" she asked. "No, I contested all of them and they were eventually dismissed." "Smart." "We have identified several homeowners who did pay significant fines, often because they were afraid of having liens placed on their properties. The money was deposited into the HOA's operating account, but we are having trouble accounting for where some of it went." Over the next few weeks, the investigation expanded. Detective Morrison and her team subpoenaed the HOA's financial records and discovered that Patricia had been systematically embezzling funds. She had created fake vendor invoices for maintenance and landscaping work that was never performed, then funneled the payments to accounts she controlled. The fake fines she had issued to homeowners like me were part of a broader scheme to increase the HOA's cash flow, which she then skimmed. In total, Patricia had stolen over $180,000 from the Riverside Meadows HOA over an 18-month period. The Arizona Attorney General filed criminal charges against Patricia Henderson in February. 14 counts of theft, 8 counts of fraud, and 3 counts of forgery. The case made local news, and I was interviewed by several reporters about my experience with her. The criminal trial took place that summer. I was called as a witness to testify about the retaliatory fines and Patricia's general conduct as HOA president. The prosecution argued that the fines were part of her broader criminal enterprise, designed to generate revenue that she could steal. Sitting in that Maricopa County courtroom, watching Patricia in her defendant's chair, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. This woman had made so many people's lives miserable, all because of greed and a hunger for control. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Patricia Henderson was sentenced to 5 years in state prison and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. The new HOA board used the restitution money to make long overdue repairs to common areas that Patricia had neglected while stealing funds. They also implemented new financial controls and transparency measures to prevent future abuse. As for me, I still live in my house in Riverside Meadows. My chimney, complete with its magnificent copper cap, stands 69 inches above the roofline, a permanent monument to the principle that homeowners should not be bullied by petty tyrants. Mr. Carlson and I became good friends. We often sit on his patio in the evenings, drinking iced tea and watching the sun set over the Arizona desert. He tells me stories about the early days of the neighborhood, when it was just dirt lots and construction crews, and everyone had high hopes for what the community would become. "You did good, Richard," he told me one evening. "You stood up when a lot of people would have just paid the fine and moved on. You changed this place for the better." "We all did it together," I said. "The coalition, the recall, the investigation. None of that happens if people do not get involved." He nodded thoughtfully. "Still, it started with you and that ridiculous chimney fine. Who would have thought a chimney cap could take down a corrupt HOA president?" I laughed. "When I bought that cap, I was just being petty. I wanted to prove a point. And you did. You proved that the rules matter, that they have to be applied fairly, and that homeowners have rights that can't be trampled on. The Riverside Meadows neighborhood is a different place now. The new board operates transparently, holding regular town halls where homeowners can voice concerns. Violations are issued sparingly and only for legitimate issues that affect property values or safety. The atmosphere of fear and intimidation that Patricia created has been replaced by a genuine sense of community. I still serve on the architectural committee, and I take the responsibility seriously. When homeowners submit plans for modifications, we evaluate them based on clear guidelines, not personal preferences. We approve far more projects than we deny, and when we do have concerns, we work with homeowners to find solutions rather than immediately issuing violations. One interesting side effect of the whole chimney cap incident is that decorative copper caps became something of a trend in the neighborhood. At least 20 other homeowners installed them, creating a distinctive aesthetic that has become part of Riverside Meadows' character. People driving through the neighborhood often comment on the gleaming copper rooflines. I also became more involved in HOA reform advocacy beyond just my own neighborhood. I was invited to speak at a state legislative hearing about HOA governance and the need for stronger oversight and homeowner protections. I told my story, and several legislators seemed genuinely interested in pursuing reforms. The experience taught me valuable lessons about standing up for yourself, the importance of community organizing, and the fact that seemingly mundane things like HOA regulations can have profound impacts on people's lives. It also taught me that bureaucratic bullies like Patricia Henderson thrive when good people stay silent and pay unjust fines just to avoid conflict. One afternoon, about a year after Patricia's conviction, I was in my front yard doing some gardening when a car pulled up. A young couple got out and started looking at the house across the street, which had a for sale sign. "Excuse me," the man called out to me. "Do you live here? Can you tell us about the neighborhood?" I stood up, brushing dirt off my gloves. "Sure, I have been here about 5 years now. It is a great community." "What about the HOA?" the woman asked. "We have heard horror stories about HOAs in Phoenix." I smiled. Well, we actually did have some issues a couple years back, but the homeowners organized, we recalled the problem board members, and now we have excellent leadership. The current board is transparent, fair, and reasonable. They focus on maintaining the common areas and helping homeowners, not nickeling and diming everyone with petty violations. That is refreshing to hear, the man said. A lot of places we have looked at, people complain about the HOA being too strict. It is all about who is in charge, I explained. An HOA can be a force for good if it is run by people who actually care about the community rather than power and control. We learned that lesson the hard way, but I think we are better for it. They thanked me for the information and continued their tour of the property. I went back to my gardening, thinking about how much had changed since that first ridiculous violation letter about my chimney. That evening, I stood in my backyard with a beer, looking up at my house. The copper chimney cap had developed a beautiful green patina over the past couple of years, giving it an aged, distinguished appearance. It caught the last rays of the setting sun, glowing warmly against the darkening sky. I thought about Patricia Henderson, sitting in a prison cell somewhere, probably still fuming about the recall election and the investigation that had destroyed her schemes. I wondered if she had any regrets, if she ever considered that her greed and need for control had cost her everything. Then I thought about all the homeowners who had banded together to take back their neighborhood. Mr. Carlson, who had the courage to speak up during that hearing. The dozens of people who collected petition signatures and organized the recall. The new board members who volunteered their time to govern fairly and transparently. Detective Morrison, who had pursued the investigation diligently and brought Patricia to justice. It had been a long, stressful fight, but it had been worth it. My chimney stood tall, literally and figuratively, as a reminder that you do not have to accept injustice just because it comes with an official letterhead and a fine attached. I took another sip of my beer and smiled. Tomorrow, the architectural committee was meeting to review applications for some new projects in the neighborhood. One homeowner wanted to add a pergola to their backyard. Another wanted to repaint their house a slightly different shade of cream. Both projects would probably be approved without issue, because we had learned to trust homeowners to make reasonable decisions about their own properties. It was amazing how simple things could be when you focused on being helpful rather than punitive, on building community rather than wielding power. My phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Carlson. Barbecue at my place Saturday. Bring that famous potato salad. I texted back that I would be there. These gatherings had become a regular thing for the coalition members, a way to stay connected and celebrate the community we had built together. As the sun finally disappeared below the horizon and the first stars began appearing in the Arizona sky, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I had moved to Riverside Meadows looking for a nice place to live, a home where I could put down roots and be part of a community. I had found that, but only after fighting for it. The chimney cap, that gloriously tall, ornate copper creation that had started as an act of petty defiance, had become a symbol of something larger. It represented the right of homeowners to live in peace, to have their property rights respected, and to demand accountability from those in positions of authority. I went inside and pulled out my laptop, checking my email. There was a message from a homeowner in a different Phoenix suburb who had heard about my story and was dealing with similar HOA harassment. They wanted advice on how to organize their own community resistance. I started typing a response, sharing the lessons I had learned. Document everything. Know your CC and Articus better than the board does. Find allies among your neighbors. Do not be afraid to hire an attorney if necessary. And most importantly, Remember that you have rights that cannot be arbitrarily taken away by a power-hungry HOA board. As I finished the email and hit send, I reflected on the strange journey that had started with that first violation notice. I had never imagined that a dispute over chimney height would lead to an HOA recall, a criminal investigation, and ultimately a transformed community. But that is how change happens sometimes. Not through grand gestures or elaborate plans, but through ordinary people deciding they have had enough and taking a stand. My copper chimney cap, visible from streets away, would continue to shine over riverside meadows for years to come, a testament to the power of fighting back against injustice, no matter how petty or bureaucratic. And every time I looked at it, I would remember that sometimes the best response to an unreasonable rule is not compliance, but creative resistance that exposes the absurdity of the rule itself. The neighborhood was quiet that night, peaceful in a way it had not been during Patricia's reign of fines and violations. Lights glowed warmly in windows up and down the street. People were inside their homes, living their lives, not worrying about whether their grass was a quarter-inch too long or their mailbox was the wrong shade of black. This was what a homeowners association was supposed to be, a tool for maintaining a pleasant community, not a weapon for harassment and control. We had learned that lesson through hard experience, and we were determined never to forget it. I walked through my house, turning off lights and getting ready for bed. In my office, I glanced at the framed certificate on the wall. It was from the Riverside Meadows Homeowners Coalition, presented to me at a neighborhood barbecue a few months after the recall election. The inscription read, "To Richard Norton, who stood tall when others would have backed down, your courage inspired a community." I had not done it for recognition, but I appreciated the gesture. More than that, I appreciated living in a neighborhood where people cared about each other and were willing to fight for what was right. As I settled into bed that night, I thought about the long, winding path from that first violation notice to where we were now. It had been exhausting, frustrating, and at times infuriating. But it had also brought out the best in people, showing what a community could accomplish when its members worked together toward a common goal. My chimney, with its magnificent copper cap, would greet the sunrise tomorrow morning, standing 69 inches above the roofline in all its glory. And I would wake up knowing that I lived in a place where homeowners had rights, where fairness prevailed over petty tyranny, and where a community had found its voice. The fight had been worth it. Every contested violation, every hearing, every signature collected for the recall petition, every hour spent organizing with neighbors had been worth it. Because in the end, we had not just defeated one corrupt HOA president. We had transformed our entire community into what it was always meant to be, a place where people could live in peace, take pride in their homes, and know that their rights would be respected. That was the real victory. Not the recall election, not the criminal conviction, not even the vindication of having my ridiculous fines dismissed. The real victory was building something better, something that would last long after everyone involved had moved on. And it all started because Patricia Henderson made the mistake of fining me for my chimney height, and I responded by making it taller. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor, and sometimes the best act of defiance is simply to do exactly what they told you not to do, but in a way they never saw coming. I fell asleep that night with a smile on my face, the Arizona moon casting soft light through my bedroom window, my absurdly tall chimney standing guard over my home and my neighborhood, a monument to the principle that you should never let the bureaucrats win.